This is actually episode number 27, which is the first episode of our second year. Hard to believe we've already gone through 1 year. We're getting an enormous amount of mail, which I'm so grateful for. People that are on the inside that are listening to our guests and being inspired by some of the things that they say or having questions about the path that the other person took. My name is Augie Ghilarducci. I'm the host of the podcast. The podcast is sponsored by Second Opportunity. And the guest that I have today is special for me because he's actually a friend of mine. We shared the same cell for several years. I remember meeting him the first day he came on the compound when he was transferred in from another facility. So this is a special person in my life, Ulises Valdez. Ulises, thank you for taking the time to be here with me today. I know we've talked about this, but we're finally getting it done.
Yes, August, thank you for having me.
Great. So you've got a terrific story, and I guess I want to give a little bit of backstory and then, bring you into this thing. But as I mentioned earlier, Ulises and I were in the same cell for a while, but we knew each other much longer than when we actually ended up living in the same room. And I will say that this man folds his clothes neater than anybody on the planet. He had a special way of getting things so they all fit into the small drawers that we had. But I wanted to really bring him on because what he's accomplished since he left prison, and he left a little bit before me, but what he's accomplished since he left prison, it's absolutely incredible. And it's not just in one area, but it's in multiple areas of his life. So I'd like to start out by asking a little bit about your background, if you would, where you were born, where you grew up, if you enjoyed school, what you did in school, sports or good grades or whatever it is that was interesting to you.
Sure. So, I am actually first generation Mexican American. So my parents both were born in Mexico, raised in Mexico, lived in Mexico all their life. However, my mom had gotten a work visa to come to the United States and start working. My father at that time was unable to get a visa, so he couldn't come over to the United States. While in the United States, my mom actually my mom got pregnant, not while in the US, but she got pregnant, and then she was still working. She was still migrantly working, and so she came to United States and she had me here. And she had me here because she knew of the the pros that come with being a U.S. citizen. And so that was kind of you know, probably the greatest thing that my mom could ever do. Because my older brother, he was not that fortunate, and so he was born in Mexico. And actually, my older brother was in the same situation as I was, and he got deported. And being that I'm a citizen, I was able to stay in the country, obviously. So my mother put us in grade school in early Texas. I went to pre-kinder and kindergarten, but by first grade, my mom moved us up to Minnesota, which was a chicken factory that she worked there. And so this chicken factory, they just contracted a bunch of migrant workers to come up, and they housed them up here. And then they gave them work. And so my mom brought us up here. And so I was just this young Hispanic boy with limited amount of English, going to predominantly Caucasian school. And so it was some of the first difficulties that I would begin to face as a person. As a child, we're very conscious. We see a lot of things, but not until something is very blatantly in your face does it start affecting you. And so for me, it was the fact that I was like one in like 20, I was the only Hispanic kid in the classroom, and that altered my my friendships. It altered like even my relationships with teachers as well. Sometimes that was good, and sometimes that it wasn't as good. But anyways, as I grew up, you know what I mean. I just kind of stuck to kids who would hang out with me, and so I had a limited amount of friendships that I could make, and so some of these friendships weren't good. And so I started growing up, and then I just started developing an identity. Um, just kind of a side note, that's one of the things that I've been really thinking about, is just identity, who I am and things like that, and who I want to be, and who I portray. But as as a young kid, I noticed that I started to develop the identity that, hey, I am a lesser class, which is totally just a thinking error. If you think about it, it's an erroneous core belief, but that's what I started thinking. And I said, you know what? I stand over here because first and foremost, we would live in apartments or mobile homes. And I was just like, you know what? And my mom, had a job that wasn't, you know, like in a higher status job. You know what I mean? And I would see all these things, and then I didn't have the toys that my friends or my class peers had and things like that. And so I was conscious of that. So I was like, okay, so I'm in a lesser class. So, I guess it doesn't matter. And so I started acting in a way that portrayed that it's like, okay, I can act however I want. There's no standard that I have to be held to because, I'm not worthy. And so, as I started going through junior high, I started making um, poor choices, and these poor choices consisted of using drugs, consisted of staying out late past our curfews. Because in our town, our town when we were living in Minnesota, it was Madelia, and they had a curfew that I think it was at 10 o'clock you had to be in by if you were under 18. And so I started actually, anything after 10 p.m. If you're teenagers, you're up to no good. And so we started committing crimes, burglaries, thefts. We used to break into garages and steal stuff. I actually got charged for breaking into a liquor store and stealing a bunch of liquor. And I took it to a buddy's house, and then the cops knew it was a small town. They figured it out right away, and so I got charged for that. So we were doing all this heinous stuff, getting into fights, doing a bunch of stuff. Actually, on one of their like um dances, school dances, we caused this whole big scene. And I mean, it must have been like 15 squad cars from all different like little towns, because if in our town we only had two squad cars, and they all came because we started incited like a riot. This is back in 98. You could look this up. It was just crazy, and we were all underage. We were like 16, 17 years old. And this is the kind of like identity we began developing as we got older. We started, me and my friends, who were a lot of them were in the same situation as I was. We were fatherless. We had no role models. We had no purpose and no direction of what we should be doing with our lives. The only thing we knew how was what we learned from uh, gangster music, gangster movies like Scarface and Menace to Society, Boys in the Hood, movies like that. We embodied those characters. We wanted to see who was the toughest. We wanted to see who can do the most, who had the most girls, who had the most money. And so as we got older, we knew that, hey, life of crime, to do it on purpose was not it. If you had to do something, it was for a reason. But we started to more focus on how can we get more money. But that was around 15 years old. I started selling weed. Started selling weed to the apartment complex that I used to live. I remember I'd get out of school, and already grown men, like, I was 15, 16 years old, and grown men were waiting for me. You know what I mean? To serve them, their weed. And obviously it's not like, a big drug, but still, just that I had that. I'd get home from school and I knew what to grab, and I'd go meet them, right before some of these guys worked second shift, and so I started making money. And then eventually I moved to um I moved to Mankato. And the reason I moved to Mankato is because my brother-in-law, he saw that I wasn't doing much. He's like, "You're gonna come with me and you're gonna start working." And so I was like, "Sure." And so I moved to Mankato, Minnesota, and that I started working with my brother-in-law. But at the same time, my brother-in-law taught me how to work hard. He was somebody that I looked up to. However, my brother-in-law was also grew up in a similar situation, similar environment that I did, and he was also a drug dealer. So he was dealing drugs. He was older than me. He was way older. He married my sister. She was younger, but he was way older, and he was, dealing drugs. And so I would help him out, and I would be his, his kind of his right hand man. And so he'd be like, "Hey, go this and take that and do this." And so that's where it started. We started, developing that, and then all of a sudden I moved out from my brother-in-law's and my sister's house, and I started living on my own, still selling on my own. And then it got to the point where I got really heavy into the bar scene, just going to the bar, drinking, getting high, sleeping around with women. Just that was what I did. That was what I identified as. Always wanted to have fun. It got so bad that I remember that my whole week would just be a blur in the sense that I would not think about anything but just let me get to the weekend so I can party, so I can live, so I can have fun. And it got to the point where it just like I would just phase that out. I wouldn't even remember what I did during the week. And I did have a job. I did have a 9 to 5, but it was just kind of like something that I did. I really didn't require it because I was making money doing drug dealing. So anyway, so it got to the point where I was just like, you know what? I need to do something more. This is getting ridiculous. And so I really kind of started thinking about what I could do. And then I knew that all my sisters they were all servers. They were all restaurant servers. Some of them were restaurant managers. And I was like, that'd be a good thing to start. And I always had that mentality that I wanted to do something more, but my self-defeat was, you're not good enough. You probably are not good enough, so you won't be able to do that. So that's why I never applied myself at school. That's why I never applied myself after graduating. August, to be honest, the reality of it is that I I, I don't want to give my school a bad reputation, but they pushed a lot of us along. We were I don't even really remember doing much homework, but they were just kind of like, hey, let the next grade of teachers deal with these kids. Let the next grade of teachers deal with these kids. I remember at that time we had what was called the grad standards test, and we had to take a test before we were able to graduate. So and the grad standards test was, you take the test and you could graduate. They started giving it to you at ninth grade. I think it was till I was a senior that I was able to pass it. You know what I mean? And so that's how many times, and you take it every year, but in your senior year, you're able to take it twice. So I think it was my senior year that I was able to pass it, but just barely. And so, the fact that it's just like, and I think the grad standards test just gives you like an average of like a ninth or 10th grade, like educational level. And for me not to be able to pass it, and it took that long, that kind of should tell you. But anyway, one of the things that a lot of the teachers did tell me was that I had potential, but I never knew what that meant. I didn't understand what that meant or what it could be useful for. But anyway, so go back to Mankato. I started dealing, and I wanted to do something. I wanted to build a restaurant for my sisters. I'd had no idea what to do, but I knew I needed money. And so what I did is I went down to Mexico, and I started talking to some friends and some family members down there. And Augie, in my family, you're either actually really involved in church, or else you're involved in, narcotics. I got family members who are involved in the cartels down there and things like that. And so those were the two paths when you were raised down in southern Texas. So I got contact with my family, and then I just said, hey, I want to make something happen. And they're like, all right. And so they said, okay, we'll do something. And so we organized something, and then all of a sudden they 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 brought that something over to Chicago. It was through some other guy who I never knew, I never met. He brought it. He he sent somebody to bring it over, and then all of a sudden, while we were while we were in Minnesota, I'm like, hey, what's up? Is that coming to me or not? They're like, no, it's not going to come to you. It's in Chicago. You have to go for it. And sure enough, I was just like, all right. So I grabbed a couple buddies of mine and we took off to Chicago to go pick up this shipment of drugs. And sure enough, while we were in Chicago, while we were there trying to grab all this stuff and bring it with us, it was a sting. They had set us up. The guy bringing it over had gotten uh, busted, and he rolled forward. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yep.
Yeah, he's like, I'm not gonna tell you who I got it from because those guys will end my life, but I'll tell you who it's going to because those guys are just punk kids, and that's what we were. And so, I think I was 23 when this happened, and so, they you roll forward, and then it was ICE agents because it was ICE agents, International Customs and Enforcements, and um, international, yeah. Anyway, so because it was over, the border, and because it was from Mexico to United States, so they busted us at a Days Inn in Des Plaines, um, and so right there, I remember they came in like just FBI. It was straight out of a movie the way they came in with guns already pointing at us and everything. They had all the ski masks, the whole setup. They came through the windows and everything. It was nuts. The guy had been wired, and sure enough, like a couple days later, I found myself just at MCC in Chicago
Mhm.
and just kind of reflecting of everything that had just passed and gone by. And so I was like, whoa, this is a reality check. I was always conscious, Augie. I was like, you know what? I know what I'm doing. I know the severity of it, and I know the consequences if I got busted. And so I still followed through. And so Um, I looked at it. I was looking at actually at first I was looking at I think they wanted to give me 20 years. They wanted to give me 20 years, but then they were trying to use my traffic violations as my criminal history, but then my lawyer got that reduced, so then it was still kind of hefty. Um, my sentencing guideline was uh was like, 18 years, like 12 years to 18 years, or no, 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 I'm sorry, 16 to 20 years was still the sentencing guideline. But anyway, so um, while I was at MCC is when I really started to kind of just touch back on my faith. Now, yeah, there's a lot of individuals that use faith as a form to kind of escape or maybe just use it as protection, as a lot of inmates and convicts would say. But my grandma had always brought me up in the faith. She had always been praying for me and things like that. And so when I went there, I talked to some guy who I saw with the Bible, and he just kind of he's like, yeah. I was like, hey, are you a Christian, man? He's like, yes, I am. He's like, hey, I'd like to talk to you one day. And sure enough, I started talking to him. And using the faith is what helped me get through a lot of the hardships, just going through sentencing and things like that. You
Sure.
know what I mean?
Sure.
It helped me. It helped me like find some ground because sometimes I just did not know where I stood. Sometimes I'm just like, wow, I don't even know what's going to become of my life. I was ready for whatever, but it was a fear still there, an unease.
Yeah. I have to say that for me, it was a feeling like the bottom fell out of my world. And so everything is moving at a fast pace and spinning, and you don't know where it's going to land or how it's going to land. And it's hard to get yourself centered with all that going on. And I think probably a lot of us felt the same thing. Um, and it's interesting that you found somebody, uh, you were still, what, 23, 24 at this time?
Yeah,
So still a young guy, but you found somebody that starts to talk. But you were seeking somebody too. You were seeking to
true.
to reconnect with faith, and you found somebody to get you on that path. And so you were in the Fed system, right? and where was the first place that you went into?
So the first place that that I was shipped off to was Terre Haute, Indiana.
Sure.
Uh, just because of my criminal record. I had a lengthy criminal record, so they use that as a point system to see where you're going to be at as far as security level in the Federal Bureau of Prisons. So I was at a a medium level. So Terre Haute 6 months prior had just became a medium from a USP
Right.
penitentiary. So 6 months prior. So what they did is they took half that population and put it in the new facility there in Terre Haute that they just built. That was a penitentiary, and they left half there, and then they just filled it up with mediums. So it still operated like a maximum security. You had many individuals there who still had the mentality of a maximum security. So when I got there, um, I started my bit, and I mean, right away, they're coming at you. Who are you? Where are you from? What do you claim? This and that. Now, take mine. This is Terre Haute, Indiana, so you have Chicago guys all over the place. You guys, you have a lot of Chicago gangsters, from all sorts of, what I mean, peoples, folks, you know what I mean, GDs, vice lords, Latin kings, all of them, you know what I mean? And that's the mentality they have. That's the environment they grew up in. I am small town Minnesota. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
With drug background, So I go in there and I'm just like, they're all telling me, what's up? Who are you? You know what I mean? Checking my tattoos. And I'm just like, what's going on here? So, you know, uh, through God's good grace that He's given me the ability to be a pretty good, um, how do you say it? Like the ability to speak with people and to connect with people. I would just tell them, hey, I'm nothing. I'm from Minnesota, this and that, and stuff like that. And sometimes, August, if you claim nothing, that's grounds to get kicked out. That's grounds for some of these gangs to get you out of there. But like I said, through God's good grace, I was able to stay. You know what I mean? They saw that, okay, he maybe, he's nothing, but he seems all right. Because they don't want individuals who are rolling solo to be getting into trouble and stuff like that, because at the base of it all, it comes down to race, Augie, in a lot of those. There's still a lot of the prisons are still operated through segregation. You know what I mean? You couldn't sit with whites. Hispanics couldn't sit with whites and blacks and all that stuff, and they stayed away. But I mean, you were clicked up. So if a black dude and a Mexican dude were in the same gang, yeah, they were clicked up. You know what I mean? They could. But I mean, at the base of it all, they didn't want a Mexican guy walking around causing trouble, and then if a bunch of black guys jump me, it would look bad. So that's why they kick a lot of them out. But they must have seen that I wasn't there on any kind of bogus stuff, and I didn't. I was actually a genuine individual. Anyway, so while I was there, the first year, it was kind of like an amazing thing. I don't want to say prison is amazing, but I was like, whoa, like this is straight out of the movies, and I'm like, whoa, and then the first year was I was in. It was still kind of like surreal until I started seeing things that were taking place. And that's when I realized that, you know what? This place is not a joke. This place is could I could potentially get hurt or end it here, if I don't keep, what I mean, my nose clean. You know what I mean? It's so easy. And you know what, Augie? It doesn't matter how much integrity you have. It doesn't matter like how how much you're staying straight and being upright. Trouble will always come to you. Not necessarily that it comes every day, but there's always somebody, because it may not be you doing something, it's somebody else that comes to you sideways and stuff like that. And so, I mean, there was trouble there, even for me. You know what I mean? And those were some of the hardest nights, Augie, where I'm sleeping and I can't even fully sleep because there's, there's trouble, and I know I'm in it. And then it's just like, whoosh, and doors open at 5:45, and you're up. You know what I mean? You're up because you don't know what's going to happen. My bunkmate was an affiliated gang member, and if they came in on that gang, if the opposing gang came in on that gang, Augie, they weren't going to ask me, "Hey, are you part of that gang?" No, I'm being also stuck in the situation. So my bunkmate would say, "Hey, man, we're having problems right now, man. So just to let you know that doors open, man. Be up and ready." And I'm like, "All right." So I didn't even get to sleep in. You know what I mean? But anyway, the thing was is that so all this was going on. I was trying to lower my points by programming and this and that, so that my points can get lower, so that I can go to a lower level facility. Well, it it didn't work like that. You know what I mean? I didn't. I had programmed everything. I started programming, taking math courses, taking English courses, taking whatever they had to offer, and so they wouldn't my points still wouldn't get lowered. By this time, I was already probably like 2.5 years in there in the prison system. I was well known, I started getting a good reputation. I didn't get a good reputation by these, Augie. I got a good reputation because I was a man of my word. And that's one thing. In there, August, you know this, it doesn't matter what amount of money you have out in the streets. We only have a limited number of spending money. We only have a limited money amount of phone calls and all that stuff. So your greatest asset in there is your word, who
Yep.
you say you are, how you act, what comes out of your mouth. You know what I mean? And so that's how I gain credibility. And individuals would respect me just on that, uh, uh, on that trait alone. If I told you, yeah, I'll meet you out at the yard, and we'll start working out at that time, I was there. If I told you, yeah, man, I'll help you out writing a letter or something to the judge or whatever, I would do it, and things like that. And I would stick to myself, and I wouldn't necessarily be quiet. I'd talk to people, but I gave everybody their respect. They say respect is earned. I'll give that can't be further from the truth. No, we should all be born with respect. Respect shouldn't be earned. It should be taken away if you're showing, you know what I mean? You know, bad character. You know what I mean? But even then, there's a level of respect that you have to give everybody. You know what I'm saying? There was individuals there who were like, you just wanted to stay away from them, but it was always like, hey, how you doing, man? I wasn't being buddy buddies with them, but I gave them the respect, and that was, hey, Ulysses is cool. And with that, a lot of the leaders in the prison, uh, like they would tell others, that's a cool dude, let him be. You know what I'm saying? But I mean, I want to say that it was all that, but I mean, at the same time, I have to tie it all to God because, it was through His good grace that He allowed me to go through this. And He would put individuals in my life, individuals, you know, that would actually mentor me and how to, conduct myself while incarcerated. Some of these individuals, some of these friends of mine, they're never getting out. You know what I mean? But they had enough love and enough admiration for me that they would tell me honest, they would be honest with me. If somebody's doing wrong and in those prisons, you just, man, just let him. He's gonna have to learn. But these guys would take me aside, be like, hey, what are you doing, man? Do you want to get your head cracked? Well, then why are you doing this or why are you doing that? And so that was a good thing because I required that. I didn't have that. I didn't have the father to be able to tell me, hey, get da 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 da. So I was being raised by a single mother, and I didn't listen very well. My mother worked third shift, so she was gone by 10 p.m. And that's when me and my friends would go out and hang out, stay out till 3 in the morning on a school night, just doing, So I lived my own life however I wanted to. And so, but luckily I learned to accept what people would tell me. And through incarceration and through God's good grace, there was individuals that He put in my life that were very kind. And some of these were Christian and they would just tell me how it is. And that would help me. You know what I mean? And Augie, you were one of them. You know what I'm
Well,
saying?
well, thank you for that. I really want to talk about the way the many you're a very talented individual, and that's I would think what's so great about your story, or one of the things that's so great about your story. So when I met you, you had gotten to Duluth. Obviously, you did enough to get your points down so you could be sent to a prison camp, and you came in, and I think pretty much right away you started to be involved in things that just showed all the different talents and abilities that you have. So can we walk through some of that? Because I think that part of my mission with this podcast is to let people see that there are opportunities on the inside for us to develop in a way that when we get to the outside, we can use it to kind of jumpstart our life and move away from what it was and into some new areas. So, if we can, let's talk about a few things. So, the job that you had in federal prison where everybody's got to work unless they're physically unable. And so you're assigned a job and you ended up working at in the education department. Isn't that
Yeah.
so? And what was
Yes,
your
yes.
job
So
there?
so I was actually a tutor. I would tutor GED in Spanish and ESL or TABE, or I forgot what it was called, teaching adult basic education or something like that.
Yeah, tape test.
So
Yep.
I would, yep. And so that's what that those are the things that I would teach in there. I got into there in the when I was in the medium. I got into education because while I was programming, the officers are like, hey, listen, you're smarter than this. We see that you don't really need these courses, but you take them. Would you be interested in teaching Spanish? And I was like, yeah, sure. And from there, it got me in the door. And then they're like, hey, would you want to teach GD in Spanish? And I'm like, sure. And so I started getting a pay there while incarcerated, and it was a pretty good pay. And so working down, I always just told the officers, hey, I'm a tutor, and they'd plug me into the education department, and I'd be working for them. And so in Duluth, and so that's what I would do. So I got into tutoring a lot of students, and that's a very rewarding thing to be able to help individuals out, in that sense, in their goals and stuff like that. And while in Duluth, I got into also hobbycraft. I was there, and I started reading books about painting because I would always draw. Even in high school, I took drawing courses. And actually, I don't know if you can see these up here. These are some of my paintings that I did while I was incarcerated with you. And so that was something else that I picked up. But even when they say programming, it's not just educational courses in education, right? Programming means doing stuff. Like I was involved in the church, also going to Bible studies. But not only that, I played guitar, and I played for the Christian worship team. And so that's another thing that I was really involved in. You know what I mean? And that stuff, all that stuff carried out. When I transitioned out here, I got connected with the church out here, and I started playing with them. You know what I mean? And that's how I got connected with a faith-based group that's been supportive of me. You know what I mean? They've been supportive of me and my transitions.
Well, some other things that I mean that you touch on are so there's I maintain that one of the true downsides of incarceration is our loss of self-worth and self-confidence. And when I talk about it, I say it's not like getting hit over the head with a hammer. It's like a faucet dripping, just a little bit after day after day after day. And pretty soon, you don't I didn't have confidence like I had before I got locked up. And, I think some of the things you're talking about, playing guitar, performing in front of others, I mean, those are certainly things to help bring back that self-worth and give that feeling of confidence, which is, I think, one of the more important things that we want to walk out of incarceration with, because there's going to be plenty of bumps in the road on reentry. But if we've got that
Yeah,
that little bit of self-assuredness, we can take it in stride and figure out what the next move should be. Um,
sure.
I also will say that when you talk about education and the men and women that are tutoring, whether it's formally through the an education department and they're tutoring others to help them achieve their GED or whatever it might be, Or if they're informally, they're just helping a cellmate who's trying to get their GED but struggling with math, and they happen to be good at math, and they're teaching them or working with them in math. I think
Sure.
the part of that is that it's impacting not just the life of the individual that you're working with, but it's impacting their family, it's impacting their children. It's making enormous difference. And I maintain one of the ways to when I would struggle with what was going on around me, one of the ways that I could seemingly always get myself back on track is to just try to help people, do something nice,
Sure.
just try to do it because then I start to feel, that I have some purpose, that there's
Yeah.
something I can do that brings value. I will also share that I knew you in the RDAP program, and so that's the Federal Prison Drug Program, and every day, Monday through Friday, they have these morning meetings, the upbeat meetings, the rah-rah meetings, and part of the thing about those morning meetings is they always contained a skit of some sort. And Ulysses and another guy, Sam Strangini, were legendary for the skits that they would put together. But it gave you a chance to be creative. It gave you a chance to get people to laugh in the morning and to kind of enjoy what was going on. And that's why I said you have so many talents that came out as you went in as a very young man into incarceration, but these talents had a chance to evolve and develop. Come back next time for part 2 of my conversation with Ulysses. We're going to dive deeper into his journey and the pivotal moments of his transformation. Until then, keep your head down and keep moving for the door.